Chapter 4, Section 3, Stability and Instability in the American and British Worlds. In 1706 and 1707, English and Scottish Parliament passed the Act of Union to create Great Britain. From that point, the colonies became known as British North America. In the 1700s, England was a dominant sea power. Their sea power led to great prosperity. The Salem Witch Trials of 1692. The Salem Witch Trials took place in Salem, Massachusetts. People in New England lived in fear of Native American raids or attacks. The white settlers had pushed Native Americans off Native American land. Class tensions in New England also pitted the rich or elite classes versus the poor. The overall tension led to paranoia and resulted in girls being accused of witchcraft and arrested. The girls accused Tituba, who was from the Caribbean, of bewitching them. Court proceedings were held, and 144 people, 106 women and 38 men, were tried for witchcraft. This resulted in 20 people being executed, and the Salem witch trials serve as an example of people being executed for religious reasons. Women's lives. Women during this time period experienced limited opportunity compared with men. Urban women, or women who were living in cities, had more opportunity for social contact. Some women even ran shops, but that was rare. 90% of women lived on farms, and their roles mostly included working within the home. Enslaved women had far fewer rights than free women. Eliza Lucas Pinckney, who's pictured on the right, was a woman who received an education in London and was given the opportunity to run plantations, including the plantations of her father and husband. On those plantations, Eliza Lucas Pinckney helped develop indigo as a cash crop. Pinckney demonstrated women's capabilities when given the opportunity. The growth of cities: Philadelphia, New York, Boston, Charleston. In 1700, the British North American colonies had a population of 250,000. Boston had a population of about 8,000, New York 6,000, Philadelphia and Charleston around 3,000. But by 1770, the population had grown significantly. Philadelphia had a population of 30,000, New York City 25,000, Boston 16,000, and Charleston 12,000. Population increased in urban areas through trade. As supplies grow and the number of jobs increase, these cities could support a larger population. Charleston had a prosperous trade with the British West Indies, which allowed their population to increase. Commercial attitudes, commercial success, mercantilism, and the new trading economy. There were two opposing views: mercantilism and capitalism. Mercantilism is on the left-hand column, while capitalism is in the right. Mercantilism promoted colonization to increase the wealth of the home nation. Mercantilism taught that wealth was finite, so increasing the wealth of one's nation simultaneously decreased the wealth of your rival's nation. Britain was not interested in cultivating wealth within the colonies, but rather using the colonies to help Great Britain gain more wealth. Capitalism taught that wealth was infinite, and that it was the act of trading itself, not the goods being traded, that increased wealth. The concept of capitalism would lead to wealth or growth for all parties. British policies like the Navigation Acts kept colonists from getting rich. The Navigation Acts also encouraged colonists to smuggle goods and ignore laws. At this time, cities were becoming international centers and more capitalistic. They were sharing goods and ideas. In the 1720s, there was an emerging middle class, which created class movement. The middle class could move up, while the upper class could move down. A changing religious landscape, from the Halfway Covenant to the First Great Awakening. The Age of Enlightenment was characterized by an increase of science and reason over religion. Many people at this time were immigrating to the British North American colonies for religious freedom or to escape religious persecution in Europe. The First Great Awakening was a religious revival led by logical sermons giving reasons to change one's life. It was an emotional conversion to a new life and new relationship with God, though disagreements split congregations during this time period. Ongoing wars in Europe and British North America. This section of our textbook gives us a series of wars that stick to a few main themes. In Europe, Spain would side with France in wars versus England. This set up an alliance between the two Catholic countries, Spain and France, against their Protestant rival, England. King Louis of France was unhappy with the changes in England after the Glorious Revolution. France had just fought with Protestant Holland and William of Orange, who was now King of England, meaning the wars would continue. The series of conflicts between the British North American colonies and the Native Americans were typically fought for the same reasons with similar results. Native Americans were usually on the losing end. There was a lack of repayment to Native Americans who fought on the side of the British. Native Americans were taken as slaves when they lost battles, and the Native Americans began to see a harsh reality of what was to come from the English colonies. The unifying effects of the wars on the British colonies. Winning wars grew English patriotism, though it also created salutary neglect, which was the period of time when England was preoccupied with fighting with France and Spain, and mostly left the British North American colonies alone. This allowed colonial governments to grow stronger and more independent. The colonies also created their own militias. During the period of salutary neglect, Benjamin Franklin, pictured on the left, promoted the Albany Plan of Union, in which the colonies would retain their own government, but they would be led by a council and a president general. This council would have the ability to raise soldiers, build forts, and regulate trade. Every colonial legislature, though, rejected the plan. The period of salutary neglect ended in 1763 with the end of the French and Indian War. Please pause your video now and answer the 2 review questions from Section 3.